Hi everyone, Steve here from RSM and welcome to the first Coffee Conversation episode for 2025. Today I'm absolutely delighted. We're actually filming from our new office in Brisbane. We moved into just 2 weeks ago. But more excitingly, I'm joined by a very special guest in Matt Kratiuk. Matt, welcome.
Hello mate, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
Great to be here.
Great to see you again after not that long.
No,
but
not
really,
long.
really good. And look, as you know, we had a bit of a chat before, and this is all about having a casual chat over a coffee.
I love that.
So, what's your poison? What's your coffee
Mate,
choice?
look, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit it, but I'm a strong oat latte with an extra shot of coffee.
Really? Okay.
Probably for about 2 more weeks, and then I am in wedge shred mode and on the long blacks, mate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if it's any consolation. Oat latte,
very
small
good.
oat latte,
Very good.
but I kind of like the double shot too.
Very good, yeah, I'm a big fan of the double shot. This is good coffee, by the way.
It's not bad at all.
I really like it.
Yeah, it's from our friends across the road at Barmiet, so it's very good indeed.
Very good.
Matt, look, kicking things off, I guess.
Yep.
Just maybe if you could share a little bit about yourself, about your story, what brings you here, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, mate, I've got quite a crazy backstory. So I came from a great family when I was a kid. I had a very loving family, middle class. Both parents worked very hard to give us the lives that they sort of missed out on as kids, and went to private school. And sadly, by the age of about 12, my perfect little family unit fell apart. My father, who was my hero as a kid, cheated on my mum, unfortunately, with a work colleague, and so he lost his 20-year marriage to my mother, and he lost his 20-year partnership in the career and the firm that he worked for. And so I was actually sent to live with Dad. My little brother and mother stayed in Western Sydney, and it was now 14, 15-year-old boy who was experimenting with alcohol and drugs and all these sorts of things. And you had my father, who was now a full-blown alcoholic, and we had these two men, at least physically, living in one very small apartment, and it just got, unfortunately, pretty violent. And it was just easier for me to live on the streets at that point than it was to live at home. So by the age of about 15, I was homeless as a kid, and that was a crazy roller coaster because I had such big dreams and aspirations to do great things in the world, and everyone thought I had a very successful future ahead of me. I was a pretty smart kid, and then by the age of 15, I was living in parks and on the streets and begging for change to put food in my stomach. It was a bit of a roller coaster, and I ended up being homeless from about 15 to 18 on the streets of Cronulla, and they were pretty rough years. And that 3-year period on the streets had a devastating effect on the following decades of my life. I ended up becoming a full-blown drug addict by the time I was 18. I was smoking ice every day, and I became a drug dealer. So I started making money and got wrapped up in that world. And one of the big moments in my life was probably on my 23rd birthday. Some people came into my home in the middle of the night, and I was left with 3 titanium plates in my face and skull and a few other things, hundreds of stitches in my mouth and all sorts of stuff, and the drugs were gone, and that was the price that I was paying for living in that world. But that that probably gave me a level of PTSD, and from about that time onwards, I became out of a place of fear, I became a pretty dangerous guy, and I just had this thing in the back of my head that if anyone was ever going to get me, I'd get him first, and so that would catapult me into that world. And by the time I was 27, I was a gang member. I was a patch member of a bikie club, and my whole world revolved around ego. That was my life. It was about money and power and all that stuff. And one of the defining moments happened in my life. I was partying in a penthouse in Adelaide. We'd just ridden across the country, 1,000 motorbikes, and pulled into this penthouse. And I pulled my phone out of my bag. It was a Nokia 5110 back then, and I had something like 15 missed calls from my mother, and I hadn't spoken to her in a very long time. So I knew something was wrong, and I rang her straight back. I said, "Oi boys, turn the music down." And I rang her and I said, "Hey mum, what's up?" And I'll never forget what she said next. She said, "Mate, I'm really sorry to tell you this. Your father's just been killed, and we think he's been murdered." And that was a really rough time. I didn't have the emotional capacity that I do today. I was just angry and violent, and I just responded with rage, and I was breaking walls and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And over the months that would follow, the tragic passing of my father really got into me, and I'd not felt those overwhelming emotions for a very long time, because I'd been a drug addict by this stage for about 15 years, and smoking ice every day, and it was horrible. And so, what would transpire was that I had these overwhelming emotions of guilt and remorse and sadness that I had always assumed there'd be more time to tell my father that I loved him, and that, mate, whether it's your fault, my fault, who cares? I just love you. And I assumed one day when I get my stuff together that my dad and I would have that moment, and it was taken from me. So it was a really important lesson, but it also spiraled me out of control. And I ended up taking so many drugs that I actually got kicked out of the club, the bike club, for taking too many drugs, which is probably quite the...
I wouldn't have thought that's a common story.
It's quite the accomplishment.
But, yeah.
But obviously very serious, and I was basically killing myself with drugs. Mate, what happened is I ended up leaving the state, and I was now sort of 32, and I was living in a park in Glenfield in Western Sydney, and it was the darkest moment of my life. It was almost a 12-month period. There was no one left. I'd pushed everyone out of my life. I had no friends left, no family left that would talk to me. I'd burn every bridge. I'd made a real mess of my life. And at the time, I was 60 kilos. I'm 92 at the moment. And, I was doing petty little street crime to pay for my ice habit. And it was torture. I was, certain I was going to die any day. And I just didn't want to live. And my soul was gone. I'd strayed so far from who I was designed to be as a human being. And I just couldn't articulate how that had happened. And it was utter despair. And one particular day I knew I was going to end my life, and I'd made a commitment to do that. I just needed to figure out how I was going to do that. And I was at a drug dealer's house getting some drugs, and I saw a gun on the back table, and I snatched it and I bolted over the fence, and I ran down to the park, and I decided I was going to end my life. I wrote a letter to my mum and my little brother, who I hadn't spoken to for a long time, and I told them how much I love them and how sorry I am, and please don't blame yourselves. This is on me, and I'm just really sorry that I let you down. And I put that gun to my head, which is as close as you get. And in that moment, I had this thing pressed against my head, and I had this memory of my little brother and I playing around the Christmas tree. And it was 1988, and we were at our beautiful home. My father's on the lounge, my mother's on the lounge, and my dad's got this big smile on his face. We just bought him this big, beautiful red telescope for Christmas, and he always loved the stars. And Mum was just full of joy, and there was this overwhelming amount of love in this room, and there's unwrapped presents everywhere. There's this beautiful big green Christmas tree with a gold star and green and red tinsel, and his 7-year-old me looking at my 3-year-old brother running around the Christmas tree chasing our brand new puppy, a little golden retriever called Huggy. And just as I'm about to pull this thing, I have this moment where I can see my little brother turn around clear as day, and his little 3-year-old face just looked up at me, and he just lit up like I was his big hero, And that was it. I put it down. I put the gun down and made a decision that I was going to change my life. And with that, mate, at 32, I walked into a rehab and began my new story.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So that new story, and we met late last year for the first time.
We did.
And found that we had quite a lot of things in common in terms of what kind of brought us together in terms of we're connectors of people.
Absolutely.
And that really resonated, I think, for both of us.
Absolutely.
So maybe if you can kind of tell us now in terms of where things are at, and a little bit about yourself, about your business, about what you're doing at the moment.
Absolutely. So I went into this program, and they just relentlessly loved me back to life. And essentially, Steve, I was a broken 15-year-old boy living in a 32-year-old man's body at that time. You couldn't tell me that at the time because I wouldn't have responded well, but that's what I was. I was just a broken guy, right? And mate, they just kept loving me. I mean, I was in that program for 13 months. I'd tell them all to bugger off. I'd scream at them, kick them, and they just kept loving me. And eventually, I was like, oh, well, I better get on board. I mean, there's no point in fighting these guys. They just keep loving me. And it was a great experience. I went back to school and I studied business while I was in there. And a few people probably thought I was mad. I had, knuckle tattoos, neck tattoos, and, some people would suggest that I wouldn't be taken seriously in business, but I just had a real passion for it. It's what I wanted to do. So I went and studied business, and Did a diploma, graduated, won a few awards, and then came out and started my career. And I was really fortunate, so fortunate that I found this amazing company called High Pages, homeimprovementpages.com.au, which was this phenomenal Australian tech startup founded by two amazing guys, Robbie Sharon Zipser and David Vitek. And I walked into this business, mate, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was a very progressive business. The culture was thriving. It was a sales culture, and I got this entry-level role in this company. And fortunately, David Vitek became my first business mentor, and he saw something in me that I didn't even know was there. And what happened is I started getting fixated on reading things on leadership and personal development and all the great ones, the 7 Habits, Good to Great, all these sort of books.
Yep.
And as I started reading these things, I realised that I had a unique skill set to be able to communicate those learnings to people around me. And so that would be my natural progression into leadership. So I would later on, thankfully under David's wing, take the national sales manager role at High Pages. That would be my first role, sort of 3 years after living in a park. And then moved up to Queensland and take the head of sales and marketing role at All Trades Queensland, which was a great role. And then probably the biggest role in my career then was GWA Group, which was a top 200 ASX listed business. And I was the head of operations Australia, which at that stage was responsible for about $120 million of their revenue and all commercial projects in the country. I just had this great career that just continued to grow. And turning point for me was 2020. Obviously, we all got locked up in our homes and saw a bit of an opportunity in the market around Shopify, a tech platform. Yeah. We were banking, my business partner and I, on the fact that Shopify would expand profoundly with people locked in their homes. Took a bit of a risk, resigned and started a tech startup, and it did really well. And sold my shares in that a few years later. Now, of course, I'm over at Tactic in the property game and having an absolute blast. And it's ironic that it's sort of gone 360, because now what I get to do is I get to help create those amazing cultural moments for big businesses like the one that I experienced when I walked into High Pages. Yeah. Like walking through your office today, what a mind-blowing office. I mean, wow, mate, it is impressive. And, that's coming from someone that understands the game back to front now.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. I love it. And it's just so great to see the impact that has on the staff. And so it's a real privilege for me to be the Chief Growth Officer at Tactic, where I get to now replicate that right across Australia with our clients. And life's good, mate. Having a good
fantastic.
time. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely fantastic, Matt. So with so I guess Tactic, and one of the things that you've achieved in a really fairly short time, I guess, is coming back to that connectivity piece. And you've built some wonderful relationships with people, and I think you probably find that really easy because you're a very warm human being. You kind of and that we've obviously haven't known each other for that long, but that's something that's going to last for a very long time.
Agree.
So everything that and you're very well connected in the Brisbane business community. I think we're in a really exciting time.
We are
in Brisbane, and moving into our new fit out here is a wonderful experience, and for us at RSM in Brisbane, just really sets us up, I think, brilliantly for the next few years. I'd really like to hear from you about your own thoughts on that road to 2032. It's only few years away, really. It's only 7 years and we're there. The opportunities are just immense. But what do you, if we start kind of with some of the challenges that you see that we're going to have to deal with as a city and as a business community?
Absolutely. Well, look, I think for me there's probably two things I'd talk about there. One's really important, right? And it's probably been the key driver to my life today. And that and actually, when I met you, it was quite a rarity, because it's very rare that I meet someone where immediately I understand that they have that same understanding as me. And what that is that you are in love with providing value. Now, you would think most people in the business world are, but it's not how it works. And I've got a philosophy where, because I didn't go to school, and I skipped school when I was very young, and I didn't do any business studies. What happens, and we don't do this intentionally, but when we put our teenagers or young adults through university, or they study business, or they do an MBA, or they do a bachelor or diploma, whatever it might be, essentially that the whole business studies world is around how do you turn $1 into $2, and if you can't do that, then you're not good at business, right? Now, the problem with that, unless we're also teaching people about the value of relationships and providing value, is we're actually going to unintentionally turn people into completely transactional beings. Because if all you're thinking is return on investment, then that is gonna fall over into the way that you build relationships. And I'm just going to be running around town going, what can I get out of Steve Healy, right? Well, it doesn't work that way, right? And I met you, and honestly, mate, within 10 seconds of knowing you, I was like, he's one of us, like he gets it. The secret to my life, particularly over the last 6 years, since I took the National Brand Ambassador role with the Vinnies CEO Sleepout, has been that I have just fallen in love with providing value for other people. And it's gotten to the point now where the company at which I work for, Tactic, have actually employed me because they know that that's what I do best. I spend, no exaggeration, I was talking about it with my managing director the other day, I spend 90% of my days meeting with people that have nothing to do with Tactic, and yet have everything to do with Tactic, because what I'm doing, I'm out there in the community, and I'm not just building it. I'm actually not there to ask what Steve Healy can do for me. I'm there to figure out what problems I can solve for Steve Healy and who I can put in front of Steve. And by doing that all day, every day, you not only do you fall in love with it, but organically your world will just explode. And that's been the key. And you get that straight away. So as soon as we met, we got that. That's number one, right? That is the real opportunity. I would say to anyone that's listening, take a moment to just step back and ask yourself, have you fallen in love with providing value? That's the answer. And if you can do that and genuinely make it about doing that. I mean, when I meet people, they're taken because, I will sometimes pursue them and say, hey, I'd really like to take you for a coffee. I think there's great synergies between our respective networks that I'd love to discuss. They think I'm there to get something out of them. But I'm not. And so when I get there and say, hey, listen, the most important question for me today is, who are the clients that you really want to get in front of? And they're like, hey, what? And I said, because I really want to make that happen for you. And that's genuinely my focus. And then I'll go away and I'll make that happen. So that's number one. If you can do that, that's amazing. In regards to the opportunities, you said it well. We've got a runway to the Olympics. And, I'm really good mates with Anthony Ryan, the CEO of BEAT. We were talking about it the other day. And, I've got a view that Brisbane is currently in what I call the Goldilocks zone. And if you think about, if you understand the story of Goldilocks, you'll get the metaphor, but we're in the Goldilocks zone. And what I mean by that is if you look at, the two other big cities in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, one of which I came from, you will notice that in the business community, it's actually not one community, it's many, right? And I would say in Sydney, it's probably 10 or 12 different business communities. Sometimes they're racially divided, unfortunately. That's just the way it's worked out. But there are different business communities that work with one another, right? That's not the case for Brisbane. That's not the case at all. And we're in this little sweet spot at the moment, which will end, right? Which isn't a bad thing, but it will end. And we've got a runway, which I think is probably up to about the Olympics, where we're still a country town, but we're the biggest country town, right? And we're big enough now that we're a serious player and the whole world's taking notice, which is fantastic. We've got this magical little runway where if you're a good person doing great things, or if you're a leader of a business that has a great offering, there is not one person in this city that you cannot get in front of. Now, there's no other city in Australia like that at the moment, of our size, right? So that's why I call it the Goldilocks zone. And I think for anyone that's listening, it's about like, well, what do I have to offer? What do I have to offer? Who do I have to offer it to? And how do I capitalize on that window and make sure that I can get in front of those people? And we do that, of course, by throwing great events.
Of course. No, mate, I couldn't agree more. You know, the description as the Goldilocks zone really resonates with me. And I do think, Brisbane is a special place. Obviously, we're probably a little bit biased.
Listen, it's the greatest city in the world.
Great city. Love it.
Hands down.
Look at the weather today. It's fantastic.
Magic.
We did have to move it.
We had to move so we didn't get burned.
Bit hot, but, No, look, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a very powerful, it's a very personal story, and it means a lot for you to kind of share that with me and with our viewers. Thank you all for joining us for the first coffee conversation of 2025. I'm sure you found that very, very insightful and very, very inspiring. Mate, thanks again.
You're welcome.
And,
Before you go, I've got one question for you.
Yes, please do.
Why did you join the Goats team?
I joined the Goats team because you talked me into it really, really quickly. So the Goats team, for those of you who aren't aware, is a part of the Vinnies CEO Sleepout.
Yep.
And you'd heard earlier that Matt is the national brand ambassador for that. It's just a fantastic cause. And it's all about raising money and to fight homelessness across the country. Take my hat off to this guy in terms of what he's doing in that space as well.
We take our hat off to you because, I speak on behalf of, Kevin Mercer, the CEO, and all the team. Everyone was absolutely rapt to have RSM Australia be a part of that.
That's great.
We're going to do some great work. We will build, so far we've built our team, the Goats team. So far we've built 6 homes for Queenslanders experiencing homelessness. But we'll build another 7 this year out of the money that we raise. So, mate, we're really honoured to have you, and thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to that journey.
It'll be fun.
And once again, thank you all for joining me, and have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.